All right, to my guests, thank you so much for being on the show. How you doing? How you feeling?
I'm good. How you doing? How you feel?
I feel good. I'm excited to speak to you. One of my favorite authors from when I was growing up. So I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, every time you guys say that, man, I feel like I'm 100 years old. I'm like, I'm not that old. What you gonna keep talking like when y'all was growing up? Y'all grown now. I'm not that old.
No, you should be
Yeah,
proud. You raise a lot of people and you encourage a lot of people to
yeah,
read and have a love for literature. So you shouldn't feel old. You should be blessed.
yeah. But you guys say that like y'all be grown now. I've been reading your book since middle school, and you grown. I'm like, okay, that's a long time. Yeah.
Now, can you
All
tell
right.
us about your childhood and the neighborhood you grew up in?
I grew up in West Philadelphia. I was the oldest grandson. My mother was the oldest of eight. My father was the oldest of four. And I grew up in Philadelphia at a time where they had the baby boom era. So we
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of family members, a lot of cousins, a lot of aunts and uncles, and all that kind of stuff. And I was the youngest. So I was around a whole lot of older people all the time. And so I ended up around a lot of stories that I wasn't be around. A lot of grown up that a typical child ain't gonna be around if he's in a nuclear family. But I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't in a nuclear family. I was always with aunts and uncles and cousins and all that. But my mother was the oldest, and she dropped me off with everybody else with the family because she never married my pop. And so I was always around family members, and they always had stories. And so I was a natural storyteller from like 5 years old. I always been around stories.
I was going to ask you, is that the reason why it influenced your writing, being around a lot of older people?
Not writing. I was a verbal storyteller. They
Mm-hmm.
had no influence on writing at all. I didn't start writing until like late high school years and teenage, and college years when they forced us to write. When the teachers asked me to write and then asked me to write stuff that I had to explain. Once I got a chance to start writing stuff where I can control what I'm explaining, where if you ask me a question about my neighborhood, what I like, what I'm doing, where I can answer on my own and it's not something about Shakespeare or something I'm supposed to read, then I get a chance to be a storyteller. That didn't happen until high school and college. And so that's when I found out I could write. But before then, I was a verbal storyteller, like most black people. You're telling stories verbally. This is what happened, and then this happened, and then that
Right.
happened, and I could do voices and all that, like the comedians do. So I wasn't a written storyteller until late high school and then college. And then once I got to college, it took off because they're forcing you to write because you got writing assignments and you got English assignments. And then I took creative writing and that was it. I just kept rolling with it.
Right. Who were some of your favorite storytellers when you was growing up?
Oh, okay, all right. I had an uncle Andre, who
Mm-hmm.
he was the bomb. Andre was a comedian, so he would just make jokes at anybody. We called it busting in Philly. You know what I mean? I guess y'all call it screaming in New York. Why you sounding on me, screaming on me? In Philly, we call it busting when you're making jokes on people, talking about their mom and their cousins and aunts. Andre was a monster, dude. He just point out a person and he'll make up something and just keep flowing with it. So, and then Andre also was a visual artist. He could draw stuff. So we would draw out like kung fu comic book men, and then he draw out like these hieroglyphic monsters, and then he was painting on the walls and stuff. And so yeah, Andre, he was the main storyteller. And then he was the main movie dude too. He always wanted to go to the movies. So I was always going to the movies with Andre and Monte. They were my two middle uncles. My oldest uncle was Jose. He hung out with all the old heads, so I wasn't around him as much. And then
Mm-hmm.
my youngest uncle was Joe, and Joe wasn't much of a storyteller. We just got into a lot of stuff. But the main storytellers was Andre and Monte. That's where I got all the stories and stuff from them. But then I just picked it up, so I get stories from being about everybody. But Andre was the main dude that was the beast with it.
Now, who were some of your favorite authors growing up?
Oh, my favorite authors. All right. Now we got Cat in the Hat, the
Dr.
Berenstain
Seuss?
Bears, Curious George. Yes, I don't know who the authors were, but
Uh-huh.
they were my favorite books as a kid. I didn't have no favorite books as a teenager because I wasn't reading no books. So all the people that's out there, oh, I was reading this. I wasn't reading no books. I was hanging out with all the other dudes in Philadelphia, playing football, chasing girls, going to parties, all that kind of stuff. I wasn't reading no books, but I was telling stories verbally. I would say about everything we got in trouble with at the playground, with the girls, at the mall, what happened in the movie. I was the one verbally telling the stories, but I wasn't reading, I wasn't writing, and I wasn't in the stories and all that library stuff, none of that. It just happened because I ended up being good at telling stories. And then I wanted to do that stuff later on in the college years. But I wasn't
Yeah.
no storyteller with no pen until college.
You know who I used to love reading? I used to love Donald Goines books.
As a teenager,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't read them until college, until after college. I wasn't into reading like that. But I'm an information dude. So I didn't have to read to have information because I was always listening. I was always asking questions and I was always taking information. So a lot of times, you can have more information than people that read because you always taking information in. So once
Right.
I started reading, I'm a monster then because now I was already a sponge naturally. And now when I start reading stuff, well, you read it and forget. I read it and memorize. That's the difference. So I have photographic memory
Memory,
where
yeah.
anything I read and get my hands on, I become an expert. So of course I was a straight A student too, because all I got to do is memorize the stuff. So you couldn't really test me with easy stuff. You got to try to mix it up. Otherwise,
Right.
I just memorize it and get straight A's. Yeah, I call it photographic memory. Phone numbers and all that. Girl, give me a phone number.
Looking back at your upbringing, what are some of the key life lessons you learned early on that you carry on with your career as an author and entrepreneur?
Well, I wanted to play football because
Mm-hmm.
like in Philadelphia, we love sports, and I was playing football, and then of course boxing. We grow up boxing in Philadelphia, but that's a lot of hard work in the gym boxing. So most of us we rather do street fighting. You know what I mean? We get in a quick fight, beat somebody up or whatever. But boxing is a whole lot of work. But football, that was my main sport. I watch football religiously, man. It's football season now, so I'm loving it. But that's what I wanted to do. But once I fell out of, the practice with it, and once I knew I wasn't going to go pro at the college level, because it's real competitive at that level, you got to be all about football.
Mm-hmm.
And I was more academic than being all about football. So that's when I started writing and thinking about writing books. And that was going to be the only career I was going to have, football and entrepreneurship. I was always going to be a hustler. You know what I mean? No matter what I did, I wanted to own my own stuff and do my own stuff, make my own rules, my own decisions. And so I was going to do that regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, you've written about the Black experience, especially in urban communities. So, how do you approach creating characters that resonate with your readers? And why do you think it's important to continue telling these stories?
Well, again, I grew up in Philadelphia where we had a whole lot of characters in West Philly. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was used to studying black people. I know black people. And Philadelphia is very urban,
Yeah.
extremely urban. So, yeah, when you grow up in Philadelphia, we got what we call row houses where you right next to people and you got like 400 people on your block. So you ain't getting away from stories in Philadelphia. You ain't getting away from urban people in Philadelphia. And so it's really easy for me to sit on my step all day long and study people in Philadelphia because they right in front of you all the time. And Philadelphia has very strong personalities. So we not like no weak personality. So you study a person in Philly and they got very strong personalities, it becomes very easy to write people in Philadelphia. So
Right.
you imagine Kevin Hart and Will Smith, very strong personalities. All you gotta do is watch them dudes, and you can write stories all day about them. Same thing
Right.
with Gilly. If you think about Gilly and Wallow, very strong personalities. That's just Philadelphia, man. Jill Scott, very strong personality. So that's just how we are. So if you in my city and you watching a person, that's all you gotta do is watch and write stories about them because their personality is gonna jump off the wall, man. That's just how we are. So it was natural for me to write characters and stuff from the urban setting because of where I grew up in. You grow up in Chicago or LA or New York or what I mean, Detroit, places where black personalities are very strong,
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, and it's going to be easy to write urban stories. So I never had a problem with it.
But did you feel a sense of responsibility to tell these stories?
Well, if you have the ability to do something with them where people can learn something, then yeah. But if you just telling them stories for drama's sake, which a lot of authors started doing, then I mean it's not really helping people. You just putting a spotlight on the negative. But if you got some way in which they can learn from it, which my books always do that, I don't want to be a preacher, but you trying to teach something so people can learn. I think that's responsible. And since I had a degree from Howard University, you got to use that. That's the purpose,
Right.
uplifting the people, not just putting stuff out there that's already negative. You try to put a spin on it where they learn from it and possibly can change, the things that are negative in our community. So yeah, I had a responsibility to do that, but I don't know how other writers feel.
Yeah. Are you ever surprised by how many people love your work?
Nah, I'm not surprised. I'm surprised we haven't been able to do a movie yet. I'm surprised by that. But nah, once I knew I was good at doing it and people kept responding to it, I was fine with that because I understood I was good at doing
Right.
it verbally. So then once I became good at doing it with the pen, it wasn't a surprise for me. I just wanted to do it bigger. So it was a surprise that I couldn't get brothers to read. They still don't want to read. And so that the biggest surprise for me now is how hard it is to get a film situation done with capital. Very, very, very hard.
Yeah.
But the reading part, that wasn't surprising because I was already good at it. So it was just a thing of getting it in more people's hands.
Now, what's one piece of advice you wish you would have received at the start of your career? Like, what's something you wish somebody would have told you when you was first starting off?
Well, I tell you what, when I got that NAACP Image Award, out
Mm-hmm.
there in California, they had to tell me nothing. That award was big. I had never won awards. I was like, yo, dude, you never get awards for being smart and intellectual. They give you awards for black people, what I mean, for dancing and singing and sports. But the intellectual awards, they hard to get, man, unless you in school
Yeah.
getting scholarships or something. So, that NAACP Image Award, that was huge in 2001 for the sequel to so that you didn't have to tell me nothing on that. But other than that, people telling me stuff. I think that they started reading because of my books. That would be the biggest thing where people didn't want to read, and so they read. So that's like huge, and people continue to tell me that now. So that's pretty cool.
Now, many writers have cited you as the godfather of urban fiction. How do you feel about the legacy you're building in the world of literature?
Well, I came up with that whole concept of urban because I copied black radio. And black radio stopped saying black and they started saying
Saying
urban
urban.
top 40, urban this, urban that. And so I
Right.
caught on to that and I was like, okay, you know what the code word, urban instead of black. Yeah, they talking about black. So I'm like, all right, they're using urban instead of black. I said, I'm gonna do that with my books. And so I started calling them urban classic books instead of black books. And it took off, man. And then all the younger people started calling their books urban street and street lit and all that.
Oh, wow. So you created it, created the whole term.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, I started that, but I never called my book street. That was people coming out of jail writing books. They started calling that street, and then they added it on to urban. Then it became urban street lit. But I never called my book street. I may have had people out in the streets, but I never looked at it being street life. It's just urban life, because they still lived in houses. I didn't have people living on the street, so I didn't want to use that word street lit. I let the jailbirds was using that. I just called mine urban.
Right.
Yeah, I had that title for a long time. So I had other people that wrote inner city books like Donald Goines, Iceberg Slum, but what called urban back then. You know what I mean? It's just called street, hood books, whatever you want to call them. I was the one that started that term urban,
Yeah.
specifically for books.
Now, this is the moment of truth.
This is the moment of truth. Will our guest reveal their identity or keep it concealed? The choice is yours to reveal or conceal. What will it be?
Oh yeah, you go ahead and conceal it. I mean, not conceal it, reveal it. I'm saying the wrong thing. You can
So
reveal it. They
all
got we
right.
got to know who we talking to.
So please introduce yourself.
Allow me to introduce myself. My man's M to the A-R, E-Y-R to the double E. Omar Shari, man, a Philadelphian, doing this. Same age as Jay-Z. I'm older than him. His birthday is in late 69. Mine is in April. Puffy was 69 too. Jennifer Lopez, 69. Ice Cube, 69. What's the other boy name? Tyler Perry, I think, is 69. So we got a whole lot of us great minds born in 1969. Omar
All
Shari from Philly.
right.
Yeah.
Round of applause, everyone. Round of applause. Now, Omar, what are some of the unique challenges you face in the world as a Black author, and how have you navigated those obstacles?
Or the obstacles. Well, trying to get media attention is very hard,
Really, for you?
especially now. Yeah, media attention is very hard. You got to understand, if they don't read the books, then they don't have questions prepared for you, and they don't feel comfortable. And they never
Mm-hmm.
read the books, so they never really feel comfortable. But I've always just jump on the show and just talk about the books and the subject of the books. You don't have to ask me a question. I already read it. But if they're nervous about asking you questions, then they're nervous about having you on. And if they read, they'll be nervous about questions. If they don't know what you're talking about, they don't want to do the show. Getting media attention is often hard for authors, and it's not the sexiest, entertainment field. You got actors and directors and rappers and all that. They become more sexy. They get more interviews and whatnot. And so getting interviews has always been hard. And so I've always been extra happy to be on a podcast or an interview or any radio show or television show. And I've always done an excellent job with a lot of enthusiasm. But that's always been a hurdle. Marketing and interviews and all that for books, because our community is still like, books? You're going to invite him on for books? I don't read books. And guys immediately tell you, I don't read books, brother. You got to put it in the movie. You got to put it in the audio. Give it to
Right.
my girl. Give it to my mom. Give it to my aunt. Guys really still don't want to read no books. And so those are the biggest pitfalls, in the author's life. Getting marketing, interviews, and brothers to know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I have a lot of friends that are authors, and they was telling me how it's really difficult with the book game. Like you have to really hustle.
Definitely. But I got a lot of energy, so that's what I was doing, hustling and selling books. But now I don't want to hustle as much as I used to with selling books all the time at events and whatnot. Now I'm trying to set up bigger events than that and put out other people's books, because I know what I'm doing now. So I want
Right.
to, kind of phase out that stage of being at every event, selling books hand and foot. I want to just sit behind a desk and have those books moving. So I'm going to set up other people where they got big events would make the books move. I'm setting that up now. We're trying to get sponsors and marketers behind what I'm doing, because that makes it easier when people already know what you're doing, as opposed to you jumping out and announcing it by yourself. And that's what
Right.
happens when you don't have the marketing capital.
Right. Now, Fly Girl has become an iconic novel within urban fiction. What do you think is it about Tracy Ellis' story that still resonates with so many readers today?
It was a young urban girl story told from the young urban girl's perspective. And it
Mm-hmm.
had all the young urban slang in it. And we weren't used to that. It blew people's minds. Who
Mm-hmm.
wrote this book? Who told this person they can write this way? Who allowed you to put the slang in it? Who allowed you to put the hip hop in it? Who allowed you to put everything we wore in it? And I'm like, well, I'm a storyteller, and that's what I grew up in. Why would I do something different? This is how we spoke. This is how we dressed. This is what we did. And I
Right.
happened to write it. But I was the first one to do that. And so it just blew people's minds. And then girls are more willing to read than boys are. And so since the book was Fly Girl instead of Fly Boy, if I had written Fly Boy, it wouldn't have done as well, because girls wouldn't have been into the boy's story as much as they were into their own story. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the major reasons why Fly Girl took off, girls are way more willing to read than guys are. I didn't know that at the time, but thank God that happened, because had I wrote it from a guy's perspective, it wouldn't have did the same thing. But as a guy, I was chasing fly girls anyway, so I'm going to write about the thing I was chasing. I'm not
Right.
writing about the guys I was hanging out with. We
Right.
writing about what the goal is. I want that girl right there. That one right
Right.
there. We want that one. So
Right.
you wrote about it, but it blew people's minds because they weren't used to our slang, our dress code, our music in a book. It was like, wow. And it was timely. I wasn't
Mhm.
writing about the 60s and 70s. I was writing about the 80s, and the book came out in the early 90s. So it was right next to us. It was like
Right.
5
Very
years
fresh.
ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And you wrote that at 19. So the girls that you was chasing, was that your inspiration?
Inspiration. That made a whole era was the inspiration. Not just the girls. Guys were fly too. You know what I mean? We had to be fly to talk to them. We had to get money to talk to them. We had to have game to talk to them. We had to get our hair cut right. We got to get our gear right. Ain't no fly girl talking to you. If you busted, you got to
Right.
get yourself together. And so girls kind of raised your profile because you knew back then, I can't talk to her if my game ain't right. And so when a
Right.
girl was fly, she kind of took herself out of the whole, being hollered at by cornball dudes because you knew I can't get with that girl unless my game is right. And so when you became fly, you elevated the type of guys that's going to talk to you. And that's why she ended up with the flyest dude who broke her down. Because when you attract them kind of dudes, you're going to get your medicine. And she got her
Right.
medicine.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
are you surprised? Because I'm like, this book was not intended for children, but are you surprised by how many people said that they read this book when they was in middle school or when they were teenagers?
Well, the book started at 6 years old. She had a birthday party at 6. And then it really took off. I would start the film when she turned 13. That's when it really took off, when she really started chasing and getting in trouble. But at that age, you got some girls that start fast, some girls. But with that book, they put a young cover on it, young looking girl on the cover, and it got younger and younger because it was dealing with teenagers. And once people started getting that it was young, it started getting passed down to younger people. Now, I
Right.
didn't expect it to be in middle school, but you can't stop people from reading what they want to read. And the thing is, girls reading in middle school without being told to read, that's a good thing. They're reading on their own, so that's special. But then, some of the parents was like, well, this is too mature for my girl. I didn't write it for, middle schoolers. I was writing it for people that was my own age because it's my
Right.
group. So when I wrote it as a college student, I was writing it for girls that was in college with me, guys that was in college with me. I wasn't
Right.
writing it for middle school people. But once you put a book out, you can't determine who's going to read it. So now I'm 28 and the readers are 15. Now I'm 35 and the readers are 15. Now I'm 45 and the readers are 15. Now
Right.
I'm 55 and the readers are 50. There's nothing I can do about that, but they're reading it because it's about young people. And then when some of the parents was like, well, you can't put this in a young book. It's too sexual. It's too this. It's too that. I said, wait a minute. Did we do that as teenagers or am I lying in the book? Well, you're not
Right.
lying, but you can't put that in there. Look here. If I'm not lying and I'm telling the
Child.
truth, then it's going to stay in the book. You got a problem with it because you don't want to deal with the truth now. And so what? Yeah, I think Charlemagne the God got a book out. He called it Get Honest or Die Lying. And it's what it is. It's the truth. So Fly
Right.
Girl has the truth. And you can complain about how young it is, but we had some girls that started doing it early and some girls that did it late. That's just reality. And so I said, look, as long as I'm not lying in that book, you're going to have to deal with it with your daughter. And everybody had to deal with it. But daughters didn't get in trouble. They learned a lot more and they were a lot more thoughtful about what was going on when they read the Fly Girl book. And they got straight A's. If you asked them questions about that book, boy, they was in flying colors because that was a book they studied and focused on. So they all got straight A's with Fly Girl.
Right.
Everybody got A's. Yeah.
Now the $1 million
Yeah.
question, why hasn't Fly Girl been made into a movie? I know you get this question so many times.
Well, if I had Will Smith and Kevin Hart money and Tyler Perry money and Will Packer money, there would have already been a movie. It would have been a movie years ago. But
Right.
writers, we don't make that kind of money. So we got to get them to partner with us. Now, when they try to partner with us, they look at the content. Now, here we go again. They don't read. They don't read. They don't read. So they don't really know the content. They get hearsay. I heard Fly Girl is this. I heard Fly Girl is that. But until they read it, they don't really know what it is, right? And so now I can't really push it to people that don't know what it is. They only want to move off a hype, and then they want to do it cheaply. We want to do Fly Girl for $2 million. I'm like, yo, dude, it's going to cost more than $2 million. It's a real busy book with a lot of stuff. Well, we want to do Fly Girl in 90 minutes. Yo, dude, we can't do 90 minutes. This book is long. We got to do at least 2.5 hours. We can't do 90 minutes. That ain't going to work on this joint. Oh, we want to do a television series. Now we got to write a lot more to do a television series because it's not set up as a television series. And so we had a lot of disputes back and forth at how we're going to do the book, how we're going to make the book, who's going to star in it, what city we going to shoot it in. Now, you know it's the Philadelphia story, but guess what happens? Oh, Philadelphia is too expensive to shoot in. We want to shoot in Atlanta. Now, I told you earlier, Philadelphia has a specific setup called row houses. There are no row houses in Atlanta. Nothing in Atlanta looks like Philadelphia. So now you're going to try to make Philadelphia out of Atlanta to save a couple $100,000, and everybody in Philadelphia will immediately look at that and say, that ain't Philadelphia, because you can't duplicate Philadelphia in Atlanta. Baltimore looks like Philadelphia, but why would you go down to Baltimore to shoot a Philadelphia movie? You know, so it's just a lot of nonsense that comes in the way of making a movie. But at the end of the day, we don't have the money, and getting it from the people that do is a problem because they're not as passionate about that movie as you are.
Damn. Yo, that's so messed up because I can only imagine how frustrated you are with this.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I wrote this new novel, Control. Because with Control, I had no control over what Hollywood decides to do. And I spent a good 12, 15 years flying out to Hollywood, trying to negotiate stuff, and it just wasn't moving. Now, everybody tells me, Omar, you can't be in control out there. Just let it go. Just let them do what they want to do. And when you do that, they end up messing up your movie. And then everybody asks you questions about it. So then I end up having to respond to everybody's question about why they did this wrong, why they did that wrong, why they did this wrong. And I don't have the personality to be standing in front of you making excuses for something I didn't. That would frustrate me too. Right. So we're in a situation where we just got to wait it out to find the right people that believe in what we're doing. But we got Fly Girl coming out again next year. We got some new things happening with it. So let's see if we can get the momentum again next year to get money people behind us, because that hasn't happened yet.
Now, every successful person experiences setbacks. Can you share a time when you faced failure or disappointment in your career and how you overcame it? Because I'm surprised you don't get media attention.
Well, right now, I'm still working on my career. I got some new things I'm working on now. I want to have an imprint where I'm putting out other people's books. I want to do more sports and celebrity books because they can sell a lot more and get a lot more exposure. I want to do more movies adapted from books. There's a lot of stuff I still want to do. Now it's just about me staying alive and making it happen and staying healthy. So we'll see if the Lord give me more years in which to do all that. But the frustration, I wrote a book called Control that's on the market right now that deals with a lot of people's frustrations when you can't control what you want to do in life. And none of us really controls what happens. We can control as much as we can, and then we got to let the rest of it go and pray to God that things happen in our favor. And so that's what I have to do. Stop the frustration and just understand that you're not going to be in control all the time. But you can read that book, Control by Omar Tyree, on the market now, and you'll get the feeling of how frustrating it can be when you're not in control of a lot of things.
Yeah. Now, over the years, how has your perspective on the publishing industry and the types of stories it promotes changed?
Well, you know, it's up to the people to read and write those stories. I've always written stories that are there to uplift people, educate folks, inspire folks, you know, but the popular books are the ones that are going to impact people the most. And so it's about having popular books, books that you can market, and again, getting the interviews so you can relay the content of your books over to a larger audience. And if you can get films, you can relay the content of your books into a larger audience as well. And so right now, if I get a chance to get the imprint that I'm fighting for, you're going to see a whole lot of creative marketing, a lot of power marketing, a lot more marketing for books that we're not seeing right now. You're going to see more book events and giant arenas and a lot of events. The same event I met you at, you know what I mean, at the Invest Fest down in Atlanta. Yeah, I would love to have books set up down there, like with a whole platform and announcements for the authors, you know. So it's a lot of events where you got a lot of people where you want to make sure they understand that they're there for books and they don't run away from it. So I want to set up a lot of book events where you come in knowing that you're going to get a book and you're going to walk out with a book and you're going to listen to book talk. And I would like to have that thousands of people. And so I'm working on that to get thousands of people to come to a book event and walk out with books where they happy to be there. And so that's the kind of stuff I want to work on and show publishers how to do that. Charlemagne the God has been doing some of that with his books and his popularity. And we want to take it to the next level with athletes and entertainers and make it even bigger. So it's not bookstores, it's book events. giant events. And that's what I want to focus on.
Yeah. Now, have you noticed a shift in how Black stories are received today compared to when you first started? And also, have you noticed a shift in the stories that's being told by Black authors?
Well, now, social media stole a lot of fire. Podcasts has stolen a lot of our fire. Reality shows have stolen a lot of our fire. When I was coming up, writing books in the early 90s, Oprah Winfrey still had a book club. Okay.
She still
Essence
got it.
magazine still had the Essence Book of the Month. Yeah, Oprah still had a book club in the 90s, in the early 90s. Oprah was still on TV with her books, and she was pushing books majorly. So we had, and then bookstores, Black bookstores were more popular then. We had more white chain bookstores. We had Borders back then. We had
Right.
Walden Books back then. We had Crown back then. Now we got a lot of bookstores that closed down because they couldn't compete with what's going on right now. Amazon, you can order books from Amazon all the time now. And so, yeah, a lot of bookstores closed up. And, my generation, when I first came out, we were like the glorious age of book writing. Now it's harder to get. It's not as sexy. People don't know our names anymore. People knew Terry McMillan. You knew Elin Harris. You knew Walter Mosley. You knew, Michael Bazin. You knew Omar Tyree. We had names, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker. Now people saying stuff like the guy that wrote that street book about Detroit, the guy that wrote that Chicago. They don't even know the names anymore. You know what I mean? So it was a very good time when we came out in the early 90s. Now it's just different, man, because you're competing with social media stars and podcast stars and reality stars and comedians and then YouTube stars. Everybody got a platform somewhere. And so now you can't pay attention to everybody. So it's just a lot of distractions that stop the books from being as prominent as they used to be. So I got to fight against some distractions with stuff that can cut through the fight. You got to have popular people, popular events, putting books out because you got to compete with all the distractions.
Now, how do you feel urban fiction has evolved since the early days of your career? And where do you see it going in the future?
Well, again, with the future, we got to have more books that are translated into film for Black books. Like Black Panther from a comic book became gigantic.
Right.
First $1 billion book or movie rather, Black people. But it wasn't going to get done by Black people. Oprah Winfrey wasn't going to pay $150 million to do Black Panther. Nobody Black was going to do that. So if it wasn't Marvel Comics and Disney, we would have never had that. And that's what the problem is. Again, when we start talking about Black art and creativity, that's why Fly Girl and For the Coldest Winter Ever have not been done yet. We still tight on our money. And we won't spend like that, even though we know that both of these books are going to be winners at the movie theaters. We still got people with money that's nervous and don't know the content and won't do it. So the future is about, the stuff I'm trying to do, getting more movies and getting more promotions for books, and then making book writers more sexy, accessible, acceptable, and honored. You know what I mean? You got to push book writers out there more. And so I'm going to be doing that if I can get the imprint that I'm fighting to get right now. So the paperwork is already sent off, and we waiting for the discussions, and we're going to be in those discussions for the rest of the month and the rest of the year so I get that imprint, because I know how I want to push books, and that's going to be the future. How you push books strongly to people who weren't used to books being pushed in their face, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to push it right in your face, and that's what we got to do to get more people reading.
Now, can you share how your relationships with other Black writers have influenced your career? Because I feel like you had a really good relationship with a lot of writers that was coming up with you.
Yeah, well, with the new writers, I had relationships with older writers. I was the youngest at the time. Now we got a lot of new writers that I don't know yet. But if I get the imprint deal popping the way I want, I'm going to end up meeting a lot of writers, including journalists who write sports and entertainment, because I'm going to be leaning on them to write some of the sports books I want to do, because I can't write everything as a publisher. You're putting books out now. So now I have to hire people. And then I have to hire entertainment journalists so they can interview people like Glorilla, people like Ice Spice, people like Cardi B. If I want to do books with them, I say, all right, well, I need an entertainer writer that can hang with them and get the story. And then I'll show them how to write a whole book, because they're used to doing interviews. But now I got to get them structured on, okay, you got to interview long and multiple times to get a book. And this is how you put a book together. But I'm still going to be interviewing and meeting a whole bunch of entertainment writers and then sports writers and then other young fiction writers. And so that's going to happen. where I'm going to meet a lot more new people writing books that are going to end up on my team.
Well, who were there other Black authors were any other Black authors? Did they mentor you or influence you as you was coming up?
Not really. I mean, I was again hanging out in the streets. I wasn't paying attention to Black authors, so the biggest Black author when I was coming up was probably what? Of course, Alex Haley with Roots, because we came up with Roots. And then he also did the autobiography of Malcolm X. That was from Alex Haley. And then, of course, Toni Morrison was out. And Alice Walker had that Color Purple book. And that was huge. And then after that, Terry McMillan blew the thing off the hinges. And then Walter Mosley came out. And then we had Mason McCall. And then we had Nelson George. So we had a lot of authors that came out in the 90s. But when I was coming up, I wasn't paying attention to authors. We ain't had that many. I remember that when I first went to school in college, Bill Cosby had a whole bunch of psychology books and stuff that he had on the marketplace. But other than that, we wasn't reading a whole lot of books in the 70s and 80s. He had to be older. I wasn't paying attention to books. I was listening to music and watching movies and stuff. So it wasn't a whole lot of authors that got me until I got to college. And then those authors were the classic authors, Richard Wright and Donald Goines and Iceberg Slim and what's the other brother, Chester Himes. Those guys were from the old school. So they weren't recent authors, but I didn't start reading them until I got to college.
But did you meet any of these authors eventually? Like, did you become friends with them?
No, a lot of authors were gone, but you talking about the new authors. Yeah, I mean, I was cool with Elin Harris, Eric Jerome Dickey, Michael Bazin. I've been around Terry McMillan multiple times. Yeah, so you end up going to a lot of events and you meet up with them. And then I met up with the younger authors, Quan and Ashley and Jaquavis. I've been around Sister Soldier a few times. I've been around a whole lot of them. Yeah, so after a while, you're going to end up meeting up and being around them because you end up at the same book events and whatnot, down at Essence, out at library events in Las Vegas, up in New York at the Harlem Book Festival. So you're going to do enough events where you end up bumping heads and then everybody's cool with each other.
Right. Now, out of all the books you've written, which one had the most personal impact on you and why?
Malcolm X, the autobiography. That's why my name is Omar Rashad Tyree right now. I changed my name.
Wait, you didn't write that book? I said you didn't write that book. I said out of all the books you've written.
Oh, all the books I've written. Okay, all right. Well, Just Say No was my favorite. Leslie was my favorite character. Then I had a New York book, The Last Street Novel, which I was trying to shut down all the street talk. Then I had a business book, The Pecking Order. I got a lot of books I like. Fly Girl because of Philadelphia. So, Sweet St. Louis was a black-on-black love story. I wrote Single Mom to deal with the families. I wrote Do Right Man to deal with the disrespect that good brothers get from people that's always sweating bad people. So I wrote a whole lot of books that were on point. For the Love of Money, this Fly Girl sequel was talking about how we can go astray trying to get money and trying to do art. Boss Lady, I talked about women trying to control their own brands and their own career. Every book I came out with, man, it just did something different for the community, a different topic. So I love all of them. And you got to read all of them. Go to Google and Google my name, Omar Tyree. I got a whole bunch of books. People get stuck on Fly Girl, but I've been writing a lot of content for the Black community that does a lot for the Black community if we're willing to read and pay attention to what I wrote. Even this book, Control, deals with mental health and interpersonal relationships, because if you always trying to control stuff, your mental health is going to be off.
Which one of your books was the most challenging for you to write?
I ain't really, that's good. I ain't never really had no challenging books. It's just time. I'm going to get to it, make it happen. None of those books was challenging to me. I think it wasn't my book, but I wrote a book with Marion Barry, The Mayor for Life, the autobiography. That would be the most challenging because it wasn't my book. So I had to wait for him to give me the information. And a lot of times he was tired. And so one time I was waiting at his office for 3 hours. I finally get a chance to talk to him. And he says, I'm tired, Omar. You're going to have to come back tomorrow. I'm like, what? I just waited 3 hours. So stuff like that, man. Like, yo, dude, like that was the hardest. Getting somebody else's book that, he had dialysis and health issues. So, waiting to get the information, you can't make it up. You got to get it from him. And so that was the hardest thing to write. But when I'm writing my own stuff where I can get my own information on my own time, none of it's hard for me. It's just time. How much time do I need to do it? But yeah, that was the hardest book, Marion Barry's Mayor for Life, because I had to wait for him to give me the information. and a lot of time where I was like, come on, you know, because I would have done it a lot faster. But I can't make up his story. I gotta wait for him to give it to me.
You know, I've been hearing his name a lot, so I'm gonna definitely order his book and so I can read it. But what were some of the key lessons you personally took away from his story when it comes to leadership, resilience, or redemption?
He was like, you talk about people being gangster. He was gangster because he had heart, man. He told white folks, you are not getting this downtown building contract unless you put some black people on the job. And he meant it. And to say that to white people that got millions of dollars, you know, he was like, look, I'm the mayor and you're not getting this contract for millions of dollars from my office unless you put some black people on the deal. And so he got so many black people deals from that because white people couldn't get the money when he's the daggone mayor without him okaying it. And so a lot of black construction workers, or black lawyers, the black bonds people, all these people end up getting on paperwork that they didn't have before and end up having experience that they didn't have before, getting money that they didn't make before because of Marion Barry and his bravery. So he cut down a whole lot of red tape and got a whole lot of black people opportunities that they wasn't getting in the past. And I mean, I look at that and I say that's a brother with heart. That's a brother with courage. That's a gangster. That's a gangster right there that's gonna make it happen. He ain't scared. So I ain't never scared. I ain't never scared. He was and he the door in for a lot of black people in DC to make money the way they should have been making money because they were the dominant population in DC. And so, yeah, Marion Barry, man, he did his thing, dude. And he was a regular dude that wouldn't do all that red tape. If he liked what you was doing, we did his deal in 5 minutes. I had an outline for him. He said, you wrote this outline? I was like, yeah. He said, it's a good outline. How much do I need to pay you? I told him my amount. He agreed to it. We shook on it, and we went to work, man. It wasn't all that nonsense. I'll call you back. I got to talk to my team, all that nonsense. I got to talk to my manager. None of that. We made the deal in 5 minutes right in his office, and after that, we was just chilling and talking, and we went right to work. So I love that, man. That dude was straight deal.
How did y'all meet? Like, how did the conversation come about for you to write his book?
Zane had the book deal. Zane, everybody know for erotic fiction. She had the deal because she had an imprint. And so she called me up one day and asked me, hey, Omar, you went to Howard. You was in D.C. With Marion Barry and them. Would you like to write his autobiography? And I was like, hell yeah. You kidding me? Hell yeah. You know, because we was all in the city when he got in trouble. So we all knew how bad the government wanted to take him down, how bad white people wanted to get him. We all knew that. We went to a HBCU, so we on his side. So I'm like, hell yeah, I will write that book. So I told him, I said, I will protect you for the rest of your life because I know how bad they were out to get you. You know, so when I sat down and wrote the book with him, it was like Zane had it. And I sat down in his office in D.C. They flew me in for a one-day meeting and flew me back out. I did that. We did the deal. And then after that, I had to keep driving back and forth up to D.C. to sit down with him and get the story. But that's how it happened. Zane had the deal. She called me up on it. I agreed. They flew me up there to D.C. I met with him. He liked me. He agreed to do it. And we went right to work.
Now, how long does it take you to write a book? Like, what's your process?
You always got an outline. I always start off with a title. I start off with a title and a subject. Always. You know, what is the title? What is the subject? And I always keep my titles simple. I don't like no complicated titles because it becomes harder to market when people got to keep asking you, what's that about? What's that about? What's that about? So my titles have always been straightforward. A do-right man is about a do-right man. Single mom is about a single mom.
Right.
Fly Girl is about a what?
Fly Girl.
What is Leslie about?
I didn't read that book.
What is Leslie about?
Leslie. I would assume, right?
You know what I mean? Like Girl in New Orleans. So I don't pick no crazy title. Just say no, discipline. You know what I mean? And you're an artist, you can't say no. So I keep books simple. Control is about control issues. I keep them very simple. I'm working on a book right now called American Football. What it's about? American football. You know what I mean? So I do straight marketing, and then I come up with the subjects. Then I come up with the characters. What characters do I need in this particular book to do the things that I need them to do to make the comments that I want to make about these people? And so that's my process. I always come up with the title first, the subject, then I come up with the characters. Then I build a storyline from there on how many things I want to happen from beginning to ending to give you a great story. And that's my process.
Now, do you recommend for someone who's starting off to go with a publishing company or to just self-publish?
Yeah, I started off self-published because you got to put it out there. If you got a publisher that wants to publish you right out the gate, then take it. But most of us don't have that. You got to prove yourself first. So it's just like a rap career where you got to put out a mixtape first and then get viral people following you. And then Jay-Z, like, yo, I heard your record. I'm going to pick up your record. I heard your record. It's hot. You know, you got to hear it first. So it's real hard to take your book straight to a publisher and they immediately want to publish you. They want to know that you got an audience that you can write first. So I published my first 3 books in DC. I had a book called Colored on White Campus that's now called College Boy. Then I put out Fly Girl second. Then I put out a book called Capital City because they called DC the murder capital for 3 years because the drug selling was that rough in DC. And I was down there during them 3 years. But if you wasn't selling drugs, they wouldn't bother you in DC. But if you selling drugs on that corner, you're going to lose your life. And they don't care who you are. They don't care if you're from New York, Philly, Chicago. You selling drugs on my corner, shorty, youngin', Joe, I'm going to kill you, Shaw. And they meant it. And so I got all the slang in DC. I knew all the hot spots. And you don't sell no drugs in that hot spot, dude. Do not do it because they're going to take your life. And so I wrote that book. And those 3 books came out before I got a deal with Simon & Schuster with Fly Girl, because they wanted to republish Fly Girl. And when they did that, that's when my career blew up. Everybody got Fly Girl. But I started off self-published because you got to prove that you're a writer and you got to prove that people want to read your book first. And that's what I had to do.
Do you have any regrets?
My regrets are more personal, family stuff. You know, I wish I hadn't done this. I wish I did less of that. I wish I changed my mind on this. Yeah, you have regrets on personal stuff. Career-wise, not really. I did a lot that I wanted to do with my career, but personal-wise, you know, the family members and, you know, relations and all that kind of stuff, your kids, stuff that you made bad decisions on, those are the regrets that I have now. Not so much about the career, but the personal regrets that, you know what I mean, you wish you could take back 15, 20 years and change.
And we're almost done, but when you got your first big check, what was the first thing you bought?
Because
I know you was outside.
I got to think about it. I was in Delaware when I got the first contract from Simon & Schuster. And wow, that's a good question. So I'm thinking about, I already had an apartment. I didn't buy my house until the second contract. So the first contract, the only thing I can really think about is getting a SUV. Back then, it was a Ford Explorer that was pretty new. So it probably been the SUV Ford Explorer. But I didn't buy it outright. I was leasing it. So I didn't really buy anything big with the first check. It wasn't gigantic. But yeah, I think, you know, I pretty much banked it and kept doing what I was doing. It wasn't until the second, you know, contract where I bought the house in Delaware. But yeah, the first one, I don't remember like going out and splurging or nothing like that. I don't remember doing nothing like that.
Oh, okay. Because I know you was outside.
Yeah, I didn't do none of that. You know, it wasn't that big amount. It wasn't like you getting football and rapper money. You know what I mean? Like you get like $50,000 is good money, but it ain't money where you going on a shopping spree like that. And then I've never been like a physical shopping. I'm not going to buy a bunch of jewelry and clothing. I'm not going to buy that. So if I do splurge, it's going to be a house or a car or something big, not just personal items on your body. And I'm not doing that. That's featherweight.
Yeah. And last but not least, you accomplished so much. So what's next for Omar Tyree?
Oh, like I was saying, I'm trying to do that imprint deal in publishing. I'm working on 2 books right now. Actually, 3 books. The American football book. The Eagles just played the Packers in Brazil. So that's the whole storyline. I got all the research on that, writing about them being in Brazil to make it an international football book because the NFL is really blowing up. It's the #1 sport in America, the #1 sport on TV, and it keeps getting stronger. And now they're traveling to all these countries for games. They're in Germany, they're in London, Mexico, Canada, Brazil. They're going to Spain next year. They're looking at Africa and Asia. So football ain't playing, man. So I wrote that one. And then I got a book about social media that I'm working on, but I'm not going to say that title because I don't want nobody stealing the title before I put that out there. So I'm working on that too. And then I got a black man's nonfiction book that I want to put out, because at my age, I got enough to say about Black men and our issues right now. You know what I mean? To go ahead and put that out and talk about it for brothers in an age where we about to vote for a Black female president, because we got to vote for because
Yes, we do.
So we got to have a Black female president. And so what the brothers feel about that? How do we feel about everything we doing in this era as brothers? And so I want to do that book too, The Black Man's Perspective, in 2025. So those are 3 books that I'm putting together. And then you still got to get the movies, and there's still a lot of other, entrepreneurial things that I want to do. So as long as I'm healthy and strong and still alive, I got some more things that I want to do.
Well, Omar, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Tell everyone where they can follow you at.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at only one Omar Tyree. Use the number 1, only one Omar Tyree. Then you can get me on everything else. It's just Omar Tyree. TikTok, X, Facebook, what else? YouTube, LinkedIn, everything else. I'm just Omar Tyree. But Instagram is the most important right now, the most followed. And that's only one, the number 1, Omar Tyree, where you can find me. And then I also have a website that you can go to all of my websites or all of my links and go to with hotlavaentertainment.com. You can get that through the Instagram or any of my other social media, hotlavaentertainment.com, where you can read all the stuff I'm working on and all the stuff I'm doing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Omar. I really appreciate you. I'm pretty sure once people hear this conversation, they're going to be so excited. I only told a small few because I wanted to keep everybody surprised, but I know they're going to really enjoy this conversation. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Next time I got to sit next to you in Brooklyn and we just sit down and do like a regular radio.
Don't tell people where I live at, Omar.
Yeah, I'm going to be back up there. I just got invited up to New York in November. So I'm going to be up there for a book club group November the 15th. That's a Friday. So let's see if I can get up there and we do another podcast with what I got popping by then, because I'm going to have some new reports by then. When November hit, I'm going to have some new reports and some new news. I guarantee, because I'm working on some stuff right now.
All right. And to the listeners, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please make sure to email me at hello@thephdpodcast.com. And until next time, everyone, later.
All right. Thanks for having me.